Germany recognizes colonial killings in Namibia as genocide. French president in South Africa for a trip focused on the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. And thousands flee Goma as a threat of another DR Congo volcanic eruption looms. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, also lined up this hour. In business, the Nigerian Naira weakens after the central bank devalues the official exchange rate by 7.6%. And in sport, we'll have all the latest from the Basketball Africa League in Rwanda. The German government has confirmed more than $1 billion in development and aid for Namibia. A statement by the German government recognizes the genocidal killings carried out by colonial settlers against indigenous people in the first years of the 20th century. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says his country bears historical and moral responsibility for the atrocities. Maas says he would ask forgiveness from Namibia and the victims' descendants. German colonial forces eliminated over 80% of the Nama and Herero people's population. Between 1904 and 1908, the Herero and Nama were forced into the desert. Those who were found trying to return to their land were either killed or put in concentration camps. Historians have called it the forgotten genocide. Let's cross to Frankfurt, Germany, where Ryan Thompson is standing by for us. Ryan, can you tell us more about this declaration by Germany?
Hi there. Well, the view from Berlin is this is a much-deserved gesture for immeasurable suffering. Those are the words of Heiko Maas, the German foreign minister. You were just saying some of them there. The biggest thing to come out of this is it's not just recognition by Germany of a conflict, but recognition by Germany of a formal genocide that had been committed in Namibia by German forces. And it comes with a pretty significant payout, over $1.3 billion to be paid out in the next 30 years to support projects in infrastructure, healthcare, and really to right the wrongs that Germany feels it has done here. Negotiations between Namibia and the German government to get this type of deal on the table have been going on for over 6 years, and they have been contentious at times. The 9th round finally took place in early May, and they were able to reach an accord with the German government, bringing their first offer to the table, this $1.3 billion plus the recognition of the genocide. All in all, this has been a long time coming. It's been over 100 years since German forces committed these atrocities in what was a German colonial state at the time, known as German Southwest Africa. The first recognition that anything significant of that type of atrocity had actually happened didn't happen until 2004, so we've made a lot of progress in just over 15 years here.
Right, so and like you said, it's been a long time coming, so what happens next now?
Yeah, so they finally have this deal on the table. It's been in negotiations for about 15 days since the German government presented it. It seems that the president of Namibia and the parliament have accepted it. Now they will have to go to the drawing board and ratify it in early June. And once they do that, they'll be able to figure out how to exactly divide up this money between these two ethnic groups, the Herero and the Nama. But interestingly enough, local media in Namibia is reporting that they are not happy with the terms of this first deal. They want to reject it altogether, and they say that the president and the parliament have been too eager to accept it, and in doing so, they're getting in bed with the devil.
All right, Ryan, thank you very much for that. Ryan Thompson live for us there in Frankfurt. Now let's bring in Tali Nates, founder and director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center in South Africa. Thank you very much, Tali, for your time. What is the significance of this admission by Germany?
Thank you, Peninah, for having me. Recognition is really important. We just saw it a month ago when President Biden recognized the Armenian atrocities during the First World War as genocide. And this step by Germany is of enormous importance. Of course, the word genocide did not exist in 1904 when these atrocities happened. So looking at events that happened before the invention of the word, before the invention or the passing of the international law, in 1948 in the United Nations is really important, not only for the people themselves that are alive now, but for the memories of those that perished, for their families, and for the entire nation. To say that our suffering, our pain is recognized and not, put aside and say, well, it was a war and things happen. So it is a brave, courageous move. And I think that it is of utmost importance.
Tali, like you said, back in 1904, the word genocide didn't exist. It's been over 100 years since then. Just give us a bit of a background on the crimes Germany committed in Namibia.
So we don't speak so much about the colonial crimes. It is a subject that is starting to emerge in the last years. And of course, Germany came late into the colonial game. Only in the late 19th century, they sort of went into colonial territories in Africa, maybe Cameroon of today, Togo, Tanzania of today, but of course, Namibia. And they controlled their territory until they lost the First World War, and then it moved actually to South Africa. South Africa controlled their territory until 1990. That crime that happened in 1904 is on many levels a very, very important crime, international crime to recognize, because not only there was a targeted, what is genocide? Genocide, of course, is the intent to destroy a people. So there was a targeting of men, women, and children, of the Herero people and of the Nama people. And it does not matter if you succeed to eliminate everyone. 65% of the Herero people were killed. That is absolutely enough. The intention was to kill each and every Herero person. Of the 80,000, about 65,000 were murdered. The Nama people, about 10,000, 50% of the Nama people. And they were killed in concentration camps, in the desert, by poisoning the wells, for example, of drinking water in these very, very difficult conditions. And what more, that killing was denied. So genocide was denied, which is very significant to the people in the 100 years since then.
And so now, roughly, I think about 17 years later, Tali, we've got Germany trying to right those wrongs you've talked about. And they have this deal of $1.3 billion to be given out to Namibia for development. They say, is it enough?
It's a first step. Always when you recognize genocide, what is of utmost importance is recognition, saying, we did wrong, apologizing for the crimes. And then, of course, coming to terms with the crime. And reparation will be in education. You have to educate about it. It's not only about money. It is in memorialization. Do we build museums? Do we have memorials? For example, in Shark Island, there's nothing really to remember what happened. We need to do that. And then, of course, supporting the descendants of the Herero and Nama people, and supporting Namibia to remember and become stronger from this tragedy. And of course, the relationship between Germany and Namibia are of utmost importance. Let's build it as part of this program that was just launched.
All right, Tali, we appreciate those insights. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Tali Nates in Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron has arrived in South Africa after touring Rwanda. While in Kigali, the French president recognized his country's role in the Rwandan genocide. Macron said his country bears a heavy responsibility for the 1994 genocide. His visit was the first by a French leader since 2010, and the French leader looked to reset relations after years of Rwandan accusations that France was complicit in the 1994 atrocities. He also promised to name a new ambassador, the first accredited French envoy since 2015. Angelo Kopler now joins us live from Johannesburg for more on this visit. Angelo, has the meeting taken place?
Well, look, it starts in around 45 to 50 minutes time. There'll be a ceremonial opening. There's the usual photo opportunity for officials, and then the talks officially start, and they run for around 90 minutes. Then we're told there's going to be a media briefing. Of course, you'll understand that most of the work has already happened in the background between the officials from both countries and also from the ministerial delegations that are going to be hammering out some of the details of that communique they're going to share with us a little later. Then, of course, it's off to the University of Pretoria for an online and physical session where the leaders and technical experts will be talking about COVID-19 and about vaccines, and also about whether there's going to be or can be local manufacture of the vaccines on the continent. They're going to be there for around 90 minutes again, and then this evening it's off for that official state banquet. So a busy day all round for all parties involved, Peninah.
So, Angelo, there are expectations that the leaders will discuss the insecurity in Mozambique. Can you talk to us more about that?
Well, look, analysts are telling us that it's definitely going to be a topic of discussion. There's no question that France is interested. They're also dead keen for South Africa to get involved. They don't want to get involved directly. That's the French in Mozambique. And that's despite having troops stationed on Reunion Island a little way up the road. And there's also a presence, of course, a French presence in Mayotte. But they do prefer that SADC take the lead and, as they put it, that there's an African solution that is found, and that part of that African solution, of course, is the SADC double troika meeting that took place in Maputo yesterday, and a communique was issued late last night. Let's hear a bit more on that.
In his opening remarks, Botswana President and Chair of the SADC organ, Mogwetsi Masisi, was very clear about the approach that the regional grouping wanted to take.
This region will never tolerate any flagrant and brutal assault and attacks on innocent lives, including wanton destruction of property and critical infrastructure. That we refuse to be bystanders when humankind is decimated by cowardly acts of terrorists.
The technical team's proposals were presented to officials and SADC ministers at the end of April. The latest meeting saw the region's leaders sitting down and looking for common ground.
So what we had expected was for them to literally almost rubber stamp what the ministers had said. Yes, military intervention, 3,000 troops, this is what our fact-finding mission says, etc. They didn't. They kicked the can again down the road.
More detail and direction was expected, especially following the many meetings that the Mozambican president had held in the region and in Europe.
And perhaps we can see the fact that there will be a full summit meeting on the 20th of June as some kind of progress. But it really is a slow shuffle. And the question on many people's mind is, what's the destination and to what end? And the disappointment side of it, from me, comes from a failure to flag the humanitarian situation that is dire.
Analysts say it's now time for some tough decisions to be taken.
It could take weeks, it could take months for SADC to get its act together and then to decide exactly what it's going to do, and the Mozambicans to accept what exactly is going. It is not an easy thing.
The SADC technical team put 3 options on the table, from training and logistical support to boots on the ground, or a combination of both.
So, I mean, that's what I think they're going to have to try and cobble together. And I don't think we should have any great expectations of an urgent intervention coming in, even if it appears quite clear that that is indeed what is required.
The situation in the Cabo Delgado province remains fluid, and to avoid any scale-up in that humanitarian crisis, concerted action is needed, and needed quickly. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Many thanks, Angelo, for that report. Now, the Southern African Development Community met in Mozambique on Thursday to discuss terrorism and insurgency in the country's Cabo Delgado province. The extraordinary double troika meeting follows a SADC technical team visit at the end of April to assess the situation. Angelo Coppola has been watching developments for us. All right, so over in the Democratic Republic of Congo, residents are fleeing the eastern city of Goma after the government warned of a possible second eruption of Mount Nyiragongo. The volcano erupted last week, and strong aftershocks have continued to rattle the city, causing some buildings to collapse. Volcanologists warn of a worst-case scenario in which an eruption could occur beneath Lake Kivu. This could cause carbon dioxide dissolved in the lake's depths to rise to the surface, releasing invisible clouds of suffocating gas. Tens of thousands fled Goma last weekend, but many have returned. Authorities now urge residents to relocate to other areas. CGTN's Chris Chamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The military governor of Goma, Constant Ndima, has ordered people living in 10 neighborhoods around the city to immediately relocate to other areas. His directive came shortly after scientists from the Goma Volcano Observatory warned of another volcanic eruption. Tens of thousands of people have started relocating to Sake in the western part of the city. 17 villages on the outskirts of Goma city were overrun by lava on Saturday night after Mount Nyiragongo erupted. At least 32 people have been reported dead and several others hospitalized following the volcanic eruption. The city has been hit by several tremors and earthquakes since the eruption. International humanitarian organizations have relocated most of their non-essential staff to other surrounding towns. The DRC government has offered aid to some of the people affected by the disaster. Chris Chamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
17 minutes into the hour, you're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. On World Hunger Day, experts warn that COVID-19 pandemic worsened malnutrition in Africa. And the global vaccine program COVAX says it's running out of money and doses to help poor countries battle COVID.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I think as humans, we sometimes forget that we come from water, that it's not a foreign space. We spend our first 9 months in water. We're born from water into light, sound, color, breath. As we become forgetful of water, we lose a connection to the planet and to ourselves and to each other. We are a species of a blue planet, of an ocean planet. It should never have been called planet Earth. It should always have been called planet Ocean.
The UN says Mali faces extreme challenges and danger after the country's president and prime minister resigned on Wednesday. President Ban Doe and Prime Minister Moktar Wane resigned in the presence of international arbitrators a day after being released by the military. Doe and Wane were arrested on Monday, along with other leaders of the transitional government, hours after naming a new cabinet.
This is a time of extreme challenges and danger for Mali and the region. Terrorist groups are still extremely active. Communities are being antagonized, manipulated in the center. There is not enough progress in the implementation of the peace agreement in the north, and therefore there is no time to lose. There is no time to waste. And I am very concerned. We are concerned that these recent events might further undermine, jeopardize the joint efforts that we absolutely need to make to address those key challenges in Mali. What we are facing is a severe disruption of the transitional mechanism, the transitional institutions that were put in place after the coup last year, with the joint efforts of the region, ECOWAS, together with the African Union, the UN, and many other partners.
Today is World Hunger Day. Each year, the world celebrates the achievements and sustainable solutions to end hunger. This year, however, more people are at risk of experiencing chronic hunger than ever before, in large part due to COVID-19. That's according to reports by humanitarian organizations. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, an estimated 119 to 124 million people have been pushed into poverty. Aid agencies are calling for immediate and collective efforts to help end hunger. All right, so let's speak to Samantha Deb, the Food Security Coordinator for Africa at Plan International. She joins us via Zoom from Johannesburg. Samantha, despite gains made in ending world hunger, millions of Africans remain at risk of experiencing chronic hunger. Why?
Well, chronic hunger is so intricately linked to acute hunger. And when there aren't social protection mechanisms in place to buffer shocks that communities face, very quickly communities fall into acute hunger. Now, the shocks that the African continent has faced are threefold and very often layered. So the first being climate change crisis. This has created weather shocks such as droughts, such as floods. We've seen cyclones and of course the locust outbreaks. And this impacts harvests, and it also forcibly removes people from their locations. Secondly, we see conflict. Now, conflict and food insecurity are so well interlinked. We know that where people are suffering from food insecurity, 60% of those areas are also dealing with conflict. Now, more recently, since last year, COVID-19 has really impacted food insecurity. On the African continent, just under 100 million people are facing acute hunger. And COVID-19 really pushed them into situations that they couldn't get out of. The restrictions of movement meant that livelihoods were impacted. The informal labor sector was most affected, and this is a sector where we see women mostly impacted.
So talking about COVID-19, Samantha, and its impact on food security in the continent, just how bad is it?
Well, it's this year and last year was the highest food insecurity that we have seen. The impact that we're particularly concerned about is around women and girls. What we are seeing is girls are dropping out of school, and they're dropping out of school to support their families, to either search for food or to join the labor market in order to buy food. We're also seeing a massive increase in child early and forced marriage. And this is simply because families can't feed everyone. And so by lowering the number of mouths to feed, it makes it easier for the family to survive.
Right, Samantha, thank you very much for your time. Samantha Deb joining us via Zoom from Johannesburg. Now, the Global Vaccine Sharing Initiative, COVAX, says it needs $2 billion in additional funding by the beginning of June for lower-income countries. COVAX has already delivered 70 million vaccine doses to 126 countries, but it says it still faces a shortfall of 190 million doses at the end of June. It says the surge in India has a severe impact on COVAX's supply in the second quarter of this year. A World Health Organization regional official says Africa requires at least 20 million Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine doses in the next 6 weeks. The WHO has urged countries with largest vaccine stocks to redirect doses to COVAX.
The ongoing vaccine crisis is a scandalous inequity that's perpetuating the pandemic. More than 75% of all vaccines have been administered in just 10 countries. There is no diplomatic way to say it. A small group of countries that make and buy the majority of the world's vaccines control the fate of the rest of the world.
International outrage is mounting on Belarus after the plane diversion and arrest of the opposition journalist on board. The United Nations International Civil Aviation Organization has agreed to investigate the incident. Belarus says it received a bomb threat before diverting the flight. The probe will be a fact-finding investigation designed mainly to determine whether international aviation rules were breached. It will produce an interim report by June the 25th. Meanwhile, European Union nations have sketched out plans for new sanctions against Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. They could target the country's lucrative potassium industry. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. The Nigerian Naira weakens after the central bank devalues the official exchange rate by 7.6%. And Tanzania plans to ratify the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement by October.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The Nigerian Naira has weakened on the parallel market after the central bank devalued the official exchange rate by 7.6%. The Apex Bank has replaced the exchange rate with a managed float figure used for investors and exporters. The local unit sold for 495 Naira per dollar on the street on Thursday from 486 on Monday, according to a website that collects and combines parallel rates in Lagos. The Naira opened at 411 on the investors and exporters window, otherwise called NAFEX. On Tuesday, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele confirmed that the bank is no longer dealing in the official rate of 379, but instead has adopted the NAFEX for government transactions. Although some investors are concerned about the gap between the investors' rate and the parallel market, the Central Bank Governor says the government will keep monitoring and intervening in the market to keep the value of the local currency within a range that it deems fit. Tanzanian authorities say they will ratify the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement by October this year. The deal will be endorsed by the cabinet and then taken to Parliament for ratification. This is Africa's largest free trade deal and is designed to enable African nations to do business with each other with fewer restrictions. CGTN's Daniel Kejo tells us more.
Tanzania's Minister for Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation says the country is finalizing preparation for the country's biggest free trade deal signing. This involves ensuring the government, agencies and the private sector are aligned. Ministry officials say that as per the deal, there will be a joint procedure determining the tax to be applied on goods traded. The deal also aims to reduce Africa's dependency on the European market by opening up trading opportunities with other African countries. At the start of the year, some African countries officially started trading under the AfCFTA agreement, but not all countries have ratified the agreement. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa estimates Tanzania could lose 1.3% of total government revenue due to the removal of some tariffs, but says the country will benefit more from the trading in the long run. Some industry players have warned that Tanzania's underdeveloped industrial sector might not be able to compete with the products from more industrialized countries. The deal has been signed by 54 of Africa Union's 55 member states and commits countries to 90% tariff cuts within a 5-year period. The African Union projects that it will improve trade by 60% between the continent's 1.2 billion people by 2022. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
EgyptAir is expected to sign an agreement with 2 major lenders on a 10-year loan of about $319.3 million. It will be used to pay off loans and aircraft leases. The Egyptian government will guarantee the facility in a move aimed at helping the national carrier withstand the devastating impact of the pandemic. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has the details from Cairo.
Like most airlines, EgyptAir has been suffering from the effects of the global COVID-related flight restrictions that have plummeted the aviation industry. The airline says it has so far lost nearly $600 million since March 2020, when the pandemic broke out. To avoid shutdown or cutting salaries, the airline received a $330 million interest-free loan from the government to sustain its operations. In the meantime, the state-owned air carrier has tapped into cargo as an alternative form of revenue.
EgyptAir's air freight activity has imposed itself as an important alternative to cover losses. All activities in aviation stopped due to the pandemic, with the exception of air freight, including transporting medical equipment, medicine and aid to many countries, including Egypt. This subsector saw a considerable increase of 50% compared to pre-coronavirus levels. The company has also had to cut down on expenditure without slashing any salaries except 10% from the top management positions.
EgyptAir also worked on opening new routes, especially in Southern and West Africa, the United States and the Far East, to supplement income. Although international flights are gradually resuming, operating losses have continued piling at about $40 million a month, prompting the airline to reach out for another $330 million loan from local banks that will be repaid over 10 years.
The state, thankfully, from the start of the crisis, provided £2 billion, that's approximately $130 million, to ensure salaries are paid on time and meet other monthly expenses. The other £3 billion, which is equivalent to $200 million from local banks, is being utilized for plane leases, maintenance and other fixed operational expenses.
The airline is also undergoing a restructuring process to cut costs by merging 9 affiliated companies into 3. With the rollout of vaccines worldwide and the gradual return of international flights, EgyptAir is targeting the second half of 2021 to be the beginning of its recovery period. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Africa's most industrialized economy wants its aviation sector to align with global travel trends, where visitors are required to produce a mobile travel pass. The move is part of global efforts to digitize travel health certificates, partly to get tourism and aviation sectors moving once more, but also in order to deal with the growing threat of fake certification. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu exploring how South Africa can fully reopen to international air travel.
Currently, South Africa's paperwork is not guaranteed in all countries of travel, but the same could be said for other countries too. The International Air Transportation Association has introduced a mobile travel pass that's helping to prove legitimacy.
This particular initiative was successfully tested by Singapore Airlines and more than 20 carriers. We need to work with the industry to ensure that we place South Africa on a new growth path, making use of opportunities presented by technology and ensure that South Africa joins the growing number of countries that accept the IATA mobile travel pass.
For now, it's mostly business people traveling, but it's become tedious at the airports, having to social distance and produce test results. Queues become longer when documents are questioned.
I had a phone call from a friend this morning. He needs to travel because he's in the fruit export industry. When he does get vaccinated, he'll get a card, his name, ID, and the jab number. That's not verifiable. That's not good enough for you to travel. You need to take that results onto a digital wallet. If he's flying via Dubai to Singapore or something, and they want to see it and they want to check it, there needs to be this.
ATA took advantage of the rising need for speedy and legitimate COVID-19 test results last year by developing an Uber-like model to get blood results to customers as fast as possible.
You do need COVID tests in order to travel. Customers have these very tight deadlines in order to make it. Do I need a COVID result within 72 hours of leaving South Africa? Within 48 hours of landing in Germany or the UK? All these things are changing all the time, so customers need to talk to people to understand, and we're constantly doing that as countries and airlines change those timelines or change those rules.
There's still over 60 countries with restrictions on travel from South Africa. Once this pass comes through, traveling abroad will be easier.
There is a digital record of people and their ID and the fact that they are getting vaccinated. So it's just for the government to make that last step to say, if you would like it into a digital wallet.
A digital travel pass on an app that will store all the relevant information will definitely make the process smoother and more efficient, especially for business people that travel frequently. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A panel of greenhouse gases experts have met online to discuss areas where China, Europe and the US can work together to tackle climate change. CGTN's Tony Waterman has the details.
The EU, US and China may have stark differences over things like trade, politics and security, but if there's one thing they can all see eye to eye on, it's the need to tackle climate change. And as some of the world's top emitters of greenhouse gases, experts gathered for a virtual conference on Thursday said cooperation is crucial if there's any hope of keeping the global temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius as laid out in the Paris Agreement.
If we can all agree that by mid-century, if all the parties can agree on the carbon neutrality, I think that would be a major achievement.
Each has already set ambitious climate goals. The EU to be completely climate neutral by 2050. China carbon neutral by 2060, with emissions peaking by the end of this decade. While the US is aiming to have its emissions by 2030.
Those goals, without the policies to achieve them, aren't worth a great deal in terms of what the atmosphere sees. And really, that's where the conversation needs to move next. How do you get there?
Investment, and lots of it, appears to be the answer. And with trillions being spent to claw economies back from the COVID pandemic, the timing couldn't be better. China is already slowly phasing out coal, not just with windmills and solar panels, but a complete overhaul to its electricity grid, which is the largest in the world. Europe, too, is plowing billions into green investments.
Is not just about polar bears and low-lying islands, etc., but it is really about the population of the countries that we're speaking about that will be threatened by the impact of climate change, be there on health, be there economic.
November's COP26 summit in Glasgow, Scotland could be the perfect opportunity for the EU, US and China to show a united front, setting the global standard not just for ambitious climate goals, but also clear, coordinated strategies on how to achieve them. Because to really tackle climate change, every nation will need to be on board. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
In the past decade, China has become one of the biggest investors in Georgia. Chinese companies have been active in real estate, construction, finance and tourism. Chinese-owned Hualing Group has invested over $600 million, half of which has gone into building the International Special Economic Zone in Tbilisi.
This is Tbilisi's new city in the outskirts of the Georgian capital. Built by Chinese company Hualing Group, It occupies more than 400 hectares and has brought over $300 million of investment to Georgia.
Not only in Tbilisi, but all over the world, people tend to migrate from overloaded central parts of the cities to the outskirts to avoid heavy traffic and breathe fresher air. Our residential area meets these ambitions.
The new city project, also known as the Hualing International Special Economic Zone, started in 2013. It was originally built to host athletes competing in the 2015 European Youth Olympic Festival. Since then, the site has been transformed into a residential neighborhood, complete with parks, a hotel, a hospital, and the biggest shopping mall in the region.
According to the Strategic Development Plan, our plaza will become a retail and wholesale hub for the South Caucasus. Our team is actively negotiating with our potential partners.
Chinese investment in Georgia has been growing over the last decade, and Hualing Group is one of the biggest investors in the country. Since entering Georgia in 2007, they poured hundreds of millions of dollars into construction, real estate and retail, introducing new techniques and technologies that have boosted the Georgian economy.
Investments are linked to creating jobs. One of the main reasons for attracting investments is developing technology and transferring knowledge. But of course, there is a big part for new jobs, because every dollar invested in the country creates more jobs.
The Hualing Group estimates that directly or indirectly, they have created around 3,000 jobs. And most of these jobs have gone to local Georgian people.
After 2 phases of construction, the project is still growing. The pandemic has made the progress slower over the last year, but new homes are now being built, and the Hualing International Special Economic Zone is ready to welcome new businesses, both from here in Georgia and around the world. George Gogua, CGTN, Georgia.
You're watching Africa Live, still plenty more to come, including this. Zimbabwe celebrates National Culture Week amid COVID-19 pandemic.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
The World Health Organization has awarded a 28-year-old Kenyan doctor in recognition of her contribution to advancing maternal health. Peninah Karibe was named the winner of the WHO Director General's Award for Global Health. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma reports.
Kenyan doctor Peninah Karibe is an obstetrician gynecologist at a hospital in Nairobi. Karibe admits she started witnessing more deaths and complications as soon as Kenya introduced a coronavirus curfew in 2020. Moved by the new reality, Karibe founded Wheels for Life, a free ambulance service targeting mothers in labor at night.
Our third recipient is Dr. Peninah Karibe from Kenya for her years of work on maternal and child health, preventive medicine, and public health advocacy.
A recognition of Karibe's work that has helped pregnant women access emergency transport to hospital.
Hello, you've reached rescue. What is the location of your emergency?
I'm grateful because it's not for me. At the heart of it, it's the pregnant women and their cries and their pain that has led to this award. And it is for them that we do what we do.
The Kenyan Ministry of Health says about 362 Kenyan women per 100,000 die in childbirth, even when there is no pandemic.
It pained my heart that we could lose someone due to childbirth in this day and era, and it really just made me so sad when now consequently going to the world I would see mothers who had again delivered at home, lost their children, had come with extensive tears, and I needed to do something.
Dr. Kariuki has enlisted the help of other doctors and paramedics. By June last year, the Wheels for Life program had received more than 5,000 calls and delivered almost 600 babies. Patients call 1196, the Wheels for Life call center. A worker checks if it is an emergency and sends out a taxi with an overnight emergency movement pass. An effort to advance maternal health that is now receiving global recognition. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Zimbabwean musicians, traditional dancers and local culinary experts are marking Culture Week at events lined up in the country's 10 provinces. The celebration is meant to celebrate and promote the diversity and creativity of different ethnic groups. Our correspondent Farai Mokutuya has the details.
An eclectic mix brought together to showcase Zimbabwe's heritage. Arts industry has been one of the worst affected by COVID-19 restrictions, so the week-long celebrations have taken on an even greater importance.
This is a reminder to us and everyone around us about our traditions and an encouragement to continue upholding them.
It's also an opportunity to sample some delicacies like the mopani worm and to feast on traditional dishes that are regaining popularity.
It is very important to showcase our traditional food because it is healthy. It is healthy and we also produce it. So economically and healthy-wise, it is very important that we use our own food. And normally the food that is there these days, you find that it's all processed. And if you dig into it, or those that may sometimes want to check on the computer, you can actually see that most of this processed food is, it has got a lot of side effects and it makes people sick.
Remedies for various ailments were available and sages on hand to share their age-old curative benefits. An event like this would be incomplete without some music. And all of Zimbabwe's renowned traditional instruments were on show.
These instruments have been played since time immemorial and will continue to influence our music in the future. They form the roots of our local music.
I took a crash course in playing the mbira, or thumb piano, an essential at many traditional ceremonies.
I'd like to think that I'm a fast learner, but the band says I'm not quite there yet, and so I won't be joining them on stage this time round. My debut will have to wait for next year's Culture Week, which authorities promise will be bigger and better. Farai Mokutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Coming up in sports. We have all the latest from the Basketball Africa League in Rwanda.
How would you